Imagine standing on a beach at the edge of the known world. Behind you is everything you have ever known: your family, your language, the food you understand, the land your ancestors walked. In front of you is water. Not a river, not a lake you can see across. Open ocean, stretching all the way to the horizon and beyond it, with no land visible anywhere. And you decide to get on something you built yourself and go. You have no map, no compass, no sail, no way of knowing whether there is anything out there at all. You do not know how deep the water is, what lives in it, or whether you will run out of drinking water before you find land. Every instinct in your body is screaming that this is how you die. And yet, at least 60,000 years ago, people did exactly this. Not once, not by accident, but again and again until they had settled an entire continent. So how did ancient humans cross deep water tens of thousands of years before anyone invented writing, farming, or the wheel? The answer involves a vanished map, a mathematical impossibility, and one of the greatest missing objects in all of archaeology. To understand the crossing, you first have to understand that the world map you know did not exist back then. During the last ice age, enormous quantities of the planet's water were locked up in glaciers, and sea levels dropped dramatically by more than 100 meters in places. Land that is underwater today was dry and walkable. Southeast Asia was not a scattering of islands like it is now. Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, and Borneo were all joined together into one huge landmass that geologists call Sunda. On the other side, Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania were also fused into a single giant continent called Sahul. So a person could walk an astonishing distance, all the way out of Africa, across Asia, and out onto the far edge of Sunda without ever getting their feet wet. But then they hit a wall, and it was made of water. Between Sunda and Sahul lies a scatter of islands called Wallisia, and here is the crucial fact. The channels between those islands are extraordinarily deep. So deep that even when the sea dropped to its lowest point in the Ice Age, they never dried out. There was never a land bridge. Not once, not for a single day, in the entire history of our species. This boundary is so sharp that it separates completely different worlds of animals on either side. On the western side, you get tigers, elephants, and monkeys. On the eastern side, you get kangaroos and marsupials. It is a line no walking creature could cross. Which leaves us with a hard, unavoidable conclusion. Every single human being who reached Australia had to cross open ocean. There is no other option. If people are there, then boats existed. And people were absolutely there. At a rock shelter called Majedbebe in northwest Australia, archaeologists excavated stone tools and other artifacts, and the dating placed human occupation at around 65,000 years ago. Newer genetic research, published in late 2025, points to modern humans arriving in Australia around 60,000 years ago, possibly along two separate routes. Either way, the implication is staggering. This makes the first Australians the earliest known open ocean voyagers on Earth. As the archaeologist Helen Farr of the University of Southampton put it, we can see evidence that people were using boats and making blue water crossings as early as 60,000 years ago. And these were not small hops. Depending on the route, the shortest possible crossing was somewhere around 55 to 60 miles of open sea. Many proposed routes involve at least one voyage approaching 100 kilometers, which means multiple days out of sight of the shore you left. Now think about what that actually means for the people in that boat. You watch. You watch your homeland shrink and then disappear. And then, for days, there is nothing. Water in every direction. You sleep on the water. You wake on the water. Your children are with you. And there is no way back because you cannot see where back is. But here is where the story gets genuinely surprising and where most people's assumptions fall apart. Because the obvious explanation is that this was an accident. A few unlucky fishermen caught in a storm, swept out to sea, washing up on a beach in Australia. A lucky accident that founded a continent. The mathematics says no. In 2019, a team led by Corey Bradshaw published a study in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution asking a simple question. How many people do you actually need to successfully colonize a continent? Not to survive 1 week, but to build a population that does not quietly go extinct a few generations later from disease, bad luck, or inbreeding. Their model gave a striking answer. You would need a founding population of roughly 1,300 to 1,500 people. That population could have arrived in one enormous wave, or, more realistically, through repeated voyages of at least 130 people at a time spread over 700 to 900 years. Sit with that number for a moment. You cannot accidentally wash up on a beach with 1,300 people. You cannot be blown off course with your entire community, your women, your children, your elders, your toolkit, and your knowledge over and over again for centuries. That is not an accident. That is a migration. It was organized, repeated, and intentional. Somebody was deliberately loading boats with families and pushing them out toward a horizon on purpose again and again across generations. Which raises the obvious question, how did they know there was anything out there to find? This is where the cleverness comes in. Researchers, including Shimona Keeley and Professor Sue O'Connor at the Australian National University, modeled the easiest paths through Wallacea, accounting for currents, fresh water, and, crucially, visibility. And their work suggests these voyagers were island hopping. From high ground on one island, you can often see the faint shape of the next island on the horizon. So you are not sailing blindly into nothing. You are aiming at something you can actually see, one island at a time, gradually working eastward across the archipelago. There are other clues, too. On a clear day, you can spot land you cannot yet see by reading the sky. Certain clouds pile up over islands. Birds fly out to sea in the morning and return in the evening, so their direction tells you where land is. And drift modeling has shown something important. If you deliberately choose the right time of year to depart and paddle with even a tiny amount of forward effort, your chance of arriving increases enormously. Which means these were not helpless drifters. They were making decisions. And then there is a discovery that makes this whole story even stranger. Because it turns out modern humans may not have been the first to cross deep water at all. On the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, at a site called Kallio, archaeologists found 7 small stone tools. Published in the journal Nature, the dating suggests they are at least around 1 million years old and possibly older. Sulawesi sits beyond that deep water line, on the far side of the barrier. Which means some early human relative, hundreds of thousands of years before our species even existed, somehow got across open sea. Nobody knows how. The archaeologist Adam Brum has suggested it may have been genuinely accidental. Small groups swept out on floating mats of vegetation after a storm or tsunami and simply surviving the journey. That is very different from a planned voyage. But it shows that the water barrier was crossed more than once by more than one kind of human. Which brings us to the biggest mystery of all, and the twist at the heart of this entire story. We know, beyond any doubt, that boats existed 65,000 years ago. The proof is an entire populated continent. But we have never found one. Not a single boat, not a fragment of one from that time. The oldest boat ever discovered anywhere on Earth is a hollowed-out log called the Pesse canoe, found in the Netherlands, and it dates to roughly 8,000 BCE. That is only about 10,000 years old. So there is a gap of more than 50,000 years between when we know people were crossing oceans and the oldest surviving watercraft we have ever laid hands on. Why? Because the materials simply do not last. Almost every researcher believes these early craft were made from bamboo, which is naturally buoyant and grows in dense stands across Southeast Asia, lashed together with vines and plant fiber into rafts. Bamboo, vine, wood, and fiber all rot away completely within decades in tropical conditions. And worse, the beaches these people launched from are not beaches anymore. When the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose, The entire coastline they lived on was drowned and now sits far underwater. So the greatest technology of the ancient world is invisible to us. We can see their stone tools, their fireplaces, their art. But the machine that carried our species across the ocean and onto a new continent has vanished without a trace. We only know it existed because of where the people ended up. And maybe that is the most human part of the whole story. Think about what actually crossed that water. Not just bodies. A boat is not enough on its own. To make that voyage, you need woodcraft, knowledge of tides and stars and seasons, the ability to plan and store food and water, and above all, the ability to convince other people to come with you, to trust you, and to put their children on a raft aimed at nothing. 60,000 years ago, on a beach that is now deep underwater, someone looked at a horizon with no land in it and decided there might be something on the other side. They had no evidence. They had no way to be sure. They built something out of bamboo and vine and went anyway, and enough of them survived, again and again over centuries, to fill an entire continent with their descendants, who are still there today. We usually think of exploration as something with maps and ships and flags. But the first true explorers had none of that. They had a raft, a horizon, and the strangest, most powerful human trait of all: the willingness to leave everything behind, to see what might be out there.